Say all that again. All right. Welcome to the Strategy and Policy Work Programme workshop. And I'll hand over to Baz Kaufman and Jeff Lawson to take us through the program.
Afternoon, everyone. Look, what we wanted to do today, and we do this every triennium. At the start of the triennium, what we do is we work with the rest of the organisation and we collate all the ideas and work programs that are underway in terms of strategy development, in terms of policy development, in terms of bylaw development, and in terms of the development of plans. And so we present this all of organisational view to councillors, and then you have an opportunity to interrogate it, to have a look at it, and to make changes to it, to prioritise it as necessary. And from there, it gets adopted. And it's really important for us to be able to do this because it allows us to build a program of work and a schedule of work to deliver all this to committee, and allows us to be more efficient and more effective, if you like. And like I said, it's about strategies, policies, plans and bylaws. This is not about projects or programs, right? And what we've sought to do is break it into some useful buckets, if you like, for your consideration. So there's a whole lot of work that is must do. So this is what is legislatively required. Think about an annual report, think about a long-term plan, think about bylaws. These are things that we must do. Then there is other material associated with long-term plans and annual plans. So here you've got the infrastructure strategy, you've got the financial strategy, you've got development contributions, you've got a whole range of policies and strategy developments that have to be delivered on a 3-yearly cycle. The third bucket that we've kind of put together is, in essence, work that's related or aligned to the triennium plan. So there's a range of work that and actions or deliverables that you've put through the triennium plan, and we've got a program of work that touches on that. So we've identified at a high level the work that will contribute towards the triennium plan as well. And the fourth bucket, in essence, is work that committee has previously asked the organisation to deliver, and or other work that the organisation believes is necessary to conduct over the next 3 years. And that can be for a variety of reasons. A lot of that has to do with the fact that some of the policies might be old, they might be 10 plus years old, and they're no longer fit for purpose. So that particular business units might be operating under a particular policy and it feels it's too old and out of date to be effective. So in essence, that is how we've produced the program of work, and so that's in the documentation that we sent to you last, I think yesterday or the day before. So in terms of the statutory bucket, we've got a whole bunch of bylaws in that area. We've got policies. There's things like the local government statement and the regional triennium agreement, and some of those you've already done. There's water-related requirements. There are new things that we have to do in that area as well. And of course, as you well know, that central government's making a reasonable amount of change to the legislation that affects us, and that will be taking up a reasonable amount of our time over the next 3 years as well. So, if I compared this bucket this time round to previous trienniums, this one is a little bit fuller, simply because of the water reform and water-related requirements, as well as the scale of the changes that central government is asking us to respond to, if you like. The LTP bucket is also reasonably full. We have the standard policies and strategies that we have to deliver, but there are additional challenges in that space, not least because we're responding to reform in that sector as well. We obviously have to deliver an LTP within a certain rates window, and of course the Revenue and Financial Value Working Group has also made a number of recommendations that carry additional work. So this bucket is reasonably full for us in this triennium as well. The triennium plan commitment, so what we've done here is identified a range of work that aligns to the triennium plan. The training plan is around a range of actions. We've done the alignment and it's in the document for your consideration as well. And this is the final bucket that we talked to you about. So on the left-hand side of the column, you've got requests or requirements coming from committee through resolutions passed at committee, asking the organisation to report back or produce particular bits of work. So that is part of the program of work. So that's part A, and then part B of the pipeline is areas where we feel as an organisation it would be beneficial to do work over the next 3 years. We have produced an appendix as well that contains at the back of the document that we handed out yesterday or the day before that produces or outlines in quite a lot of detail which all of the projects or each of the plans and strategies, what it contains, why it's there, how it aligns and so on and so forth. So there's a reasonable amount of information in there. What I will note is that while Jeff and I can speak a reasonable amount to most of it, we won't be able to speak to every single detail of every single plan or policy because it is an organisational plan. But that shouldn't stop you asking the question. Ask the question, we'll take note of it. If we can't answer it, we will, we'll come back to you in a day or so. So why now? I've kind of covered this off. We do it at the start of each triennium. It's necessary for us to do this because we need, we're running pretty thin in terms of staffing levels. We need to schedule and program this work really efficiently and effectively, right? So we want to have an understanding in terms of what that program looks like. That doesn't mean it can't change because of course each triennium things will come up that we need to respond to. So we do expect the triennium the work program to change, but we just need to have a starting position that we all agree on. And the other thing to note and worth discussing is when we do make changes, we should have a think about how we resource changes. So if committee makes decisions to add more to the work program, that's going to put pressure on our resources in terms of staff being able to deliver. So normally what we try to do is have a discussion about if something gets added, what can we take off or what can we move down the line, right? I think we have to, because it's already reasonably full, if you think about bucket 1, which is the legislative bucket, as well as bucket 2, which is the LTP, they're reasonably full already. So if we're going to start adding more items to it, we need to get into a discussion about how we fit that into the program of work. And sometimes it's just about deprioritising something else, moving that into the out years where we can. It's not about not doing it, it's just about timing and potentially the scale of some of the work. And that, in essence, brings us to the close of what Jeff and I wanted to do in terms of introductions to this paper. But we assume that there will be a reasonable amount of questions. We understand that perhaps you haven't been able to review all of the information, in which case we're also happy to take questions after this meeting by email. But I'll leave it for there now, Chair, and hand back to you.
Lovely, thanks, Bez. Right, I'll open up for councillors' questions. Who has a question?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to query the open spaces and beaches alongside the biodiversity as our natural capital. Like, how do they sit together and why open beaches and spaces over our natural capital biodiversity? Because I understood that was trying to come last term, sorry.
Are you talking about order of things?
Yeah, well, more just the relationship between them. So just noting that my understanding of a very quick read late last night was that the beaches and open spaces was going to come for review. And that I just wanted to understand how that fit with the biodiversity strategy.
I'll check with Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
That's a very good question. They are two separate issues. I think the open spaces one was a follow-on from the work which we completed last year. So we did the, I can't remember the...
Ki tātou ki uta.
Yep. So we did all that, and then there was a natural follow-on to do the open space. This is work. The biodiversity one has been put on because we started that 2 or 3 years ago, and it was placed on hold. Our natural capital is quite an old document now, and the world had, it's probably at least 10 years old, and the world has the city's moved on a lot in that time. We've got our players like Capital Kiwi and a number of other, the communities moved quite a long way in that space in that time. So so now it's quite a dated strategy. So it's put it on there, and it supports it supports a number of the things in the training plan. So it's there as a thing which supports the direction that's been set in the training plan. But it just brings that on the table. But if there are interlinkages between those two, we would certainly look at those.
Might have Geordie followed by Tony.
Yeah, mine was just with some clarification, hopefully, on the placement of the carbon management policy that we have. It's currently set out as Part 4 in committee directed. I understand there was also a recommendation within the triennium plan to look at the leveraging of carbon credits to allow local Wellingtonians to reduce their emissions. So just wondering if that would actually come under Part 3 instead of Part 4.
That's a good point. Obviously we're now looking at the interactions between that policy and the direction, those directions set in the triennium plan, and how those things interrelate. So that's a bit of an ongoing discussion at the moment, which and there's a few balls in the air between what were the decisions around the Disaster Resilience Fund, now the carbon management policy going forward, as well as developing the pool of credits. So so that is a bit of a project planning discussion around how those things fit together.
Well, we can make the reference, we can make the
shift.
cross-reference easy.
Thank you.
Tony, and then Ben.
Yes, thank you. Having read through this, it's done by category, which I appreciate, just to getting our head around it. When would it be possible for us to also just get a calendar schedule of what the draft would be like as proposed, just so we get an idea, at least for the first year, of what is actually going to be potentially on the agenda?
In essence, that's the next stage. So we've given indicative timing within the document that is in front of you. We can do more detailed programming once we have a final program of work in front of us. So once we have a decision at council later in the month, we'll be able to carry out more of that work.
If elected members would like, because obviously there's a lot of work goes into drafting this, and there's certain points where officer advice is brought together. What's officer's advice for elected members should they wish to get a bit of an early insight to the direction of new proposed policies? Obviously, different people have different areas in different areas. So is there any particular, rather than waiting for the full report and the formal process?
Are you talking about individual pieces of work?
Yeah. So if I have, for example, a particular interest in the encroachment policy, road encroachment policy, what would the advice be in terms of just getting an early, I guess, understanding or engagement as to the direction or the key issues that are going to be changed in that policy as far as officers can see, versus waiting for the formal engagement process?
It's a good question, Councillor. And I think we probably don't do as well in that space as we could. So one of the questions that is in front of us is the scope of a particular bit of work, and I think that's what you're alluding to, Councillor. And I think earlier briefing and earlier workshops on pieces of work need to address that question, because I think certainly in the past we've been guilty of having a different understanding between the governors and the organisation about the scope or the scale of particular bits of work. And I think having good conversations earlier on the piece allows us as an organisation to scale and scope the work appropriately. So that's definitely supported.
Yeah, and I'm sure the training plan is a big help towards that.
It certainly is a big help in that space, yes.
My third question, and I need to go back on the list, can you just comment about the status in your view of the processes that you're having to do with the water services related policies? Because with Te Aki Wai and that sort of thing, I've noted that it's a bit of a work in progress as to what our policies and plans need to cover. I mean, it's almost like the scope thing, and what we're going to lose control of, or we're going to hand over, or how we reshape it, given we are no longer the responsible agency for delivering the service.
That's probably a Margot question. Who's,
is that something that's a bit tricky to answer?
No, I think it is still very much work in progress at this point. So there's a whole range of things, some of which are set on legislation, and we're still trying to work through what that means. But there's a long list. Yeah.
Okay. We'll take the question down and we'll get Margot to come back with some detailed answers. Yeah.
Thank you. Can I just go back on the list?
I've got you on the list here. Ben.
Thank you. This does seem like a lot, but I appreciate with the way you've laid out with essentially what's mandatory, statutory, and in a triennium plan, that is sort of the lion's share of the work. So there's not anything that's jumping out there of do we need to do it, but it does seem like a lot. The one that is I do have questions about. So we've got off the back of the city's safety plan commitments and a triennium plan to look at the local alcohol policy. Now the government's gone and said they're going to basically be completely tearing up the rule book on liquor licensing. So I'm conscious about how much work we do when there's a substantive amount of reform coming, and if we're getting a cart before the horse situation to go down that path. I think we should do it. I'm just conscious that if we do it and then we find out half of it's unenforceable after the law change, have we not just wasted a lot of time and energy?
Okay, so I can respond to that. Yes, the announcements, there has been, the announcements that this week, and we still will yet to see the detail. Almost all of that relates to the licensing process itself, rather than the scope of a local alcohol policy. So there is one in there about it almost as like grandfather if you had a license and then you have to renew the license every 3 years. The DLC wouldn't be able to decline it if it was outside the scope of an LAP. But that's a fairly reasonable change, probably. So the local alcohol policy provides it sits alongside that process, so that, for instance, so some of the issues that we are striking on a reasonable common basis, and where it will provide a bit more certainty. You have on one end of it, you have situations like in our arts spaces, so something like Maunui or something like that, they are on the same license as a standard bar down Courtney Place. So it does, being able to provide other forms of certainty within the licensing process for different types of operators. Now, I can't promise that we'll be able to address that, but it's those sorts of issues that would allow us to actually engage with the sector and provide a bit more certainty in the licensing process. And then at the other end, where we've said it sits alongside the city safety plan, we do have instances where we've got communities saying we have issues in our suburban centres, for instance. It would allow us to then engage from a licensing perspective to say what are the numbers of bottle stores in that area, or the hours that those bottle stores are open in, or are they able to sell single serves of beer or something like that. So it allows us to sit along, so it's sort of different to what those things, the stuff that's been announced by government is relatively, it is dealing with the practical licensing issues which the licensing system has faced, but not really changing that. We'll have to watch and see what the detail is, but it doesn't really affect the LAP side of it. So, there's another one which we've struck this year is things like the Courtenay Carnival. Was that the right word? When trying to line up the licensing conditions with the event program. So there was some practical things like that, which might allow us to actually engage with those issues. So it might give us a bit more certainty from a licensing perspective, as well as addressing some of the city's safety concerns.
Cool, no, that's helpful then. So that's good context. The second question I had, so I can see one decision in here where we've had a report back request and then a subsequent decision would play into what we're looking at, and I wonder how many more circumstances this could have raised in. So the one I'm looking at is, for instance, we want to review back on the dogs policy. Came out of committee. Now, something subsequently we decided was to change the classification of a Glenside Reserve so that horses will no longer be grazing on that land, and we want to see it restored as reserve, and there's a very strong community buy-in to have that as a dog-free area. We didn't have that context when we made the decision on the dog policy, but certainly as Northern Ward councillors we want to have that discussion with any dog policy review. So how do we make sure that will be in scope of your policy review, and are there other things, or maybe this is more for other councillors, do they need to take a look at their substantive work program and think of any decisions that might have happened since those report backs that are similar if they want to have those included in the scope of your policy work?
Yes, no, I think when we've got dog policy review, I think we're not talking about a full review of the dog policy. However, so we have got those instructions about some of those things from the coastal management side, and we have got the situation that you're talking about. But if we would do that, we'd have to go through the process and be up for consultation. That would flag that may raise other areas which would want to be included in that process. So yes, yeah, but not a full dog policy review. But
none of us are keen to do that. But at the same time, if the only way we can make this change now that the council's made the subsequent decisions for a consultation, well, then we want to see that happen because we want to have this native reserve essentially as a Zealandia. Johnny's got Mātai Moana. I'd like to be able to build something sort of similar in that context up our way. So I'm guessing, I'm trying to just make sure that councillors can feed in so that the scope of those reviews, policy reviews, might capture any subsequent decisions and are wide enough to be able to act on them.
Yep.
Johnny.
Thanks. Just a couple of quite quick questions. I just wanted to get a clearer picture of where the training plan sits in with this. Is all of the work that we agreed as a training plan that might fit in a strategy, a policy, a bylaw or a plan, is that somewhere in this work program?
What the staff have done, so the triennium plan informs lots of different things, right? So it informs the CEO's KPIs, it informs the annual plan, informs the LTP, and it informs this work program as well. And the stage that we're at the moment is we've looked through the existing work program that is underway and identified those bits of work that align or can contribute towards the triennium plan.
Okay, and then when you iterate this work plan, more work to align with the training plan will result?
in essence, any work that aligns with the Triennium Plan has an opportunity to give effect to the Triennium Plan, right? So that's what we'd be trying to do. But there are other elements of the Triennium Plan that will not be delivered through a policy or a strategy. It'll be done through a different process or a project or something else. Yeah.
More, if you don't mind. And I just wanted to get a little bit of clarity around what was the criteria that was used for that fourth bucket, that bucket of this is what officers think would be helpful for us to look at over the next training.
What was the criteria? We work across all the business units, so we will go and engage with them. So they're often they're dealing with the business on a daily basis. So they're the ones that are flagging things to say, actually, look, this needs to be updated. We're finding difficulties dealing with it on a daily basis, whether that's coming from the community or so there's no list of criteria. It's generally feedback from the business.
Diane.
Yeah, look, I think like last time, I'm really struggling with this. There's a whole list of things to do, and I understand the main categories, but there is still a hell of a lot of work there, and I appreciate that. But I'm not sure, you're asking us to approve almost a list of things, but I can't see how, I can see some crossovers and some almost duplication as well. Has this been what's the ELT's view? I mean, have they gone through this and said this is from their own from their own team's perspective and saying, yep. So I'm just interested to understand where has ELT's view on this come in?
Yes, so ELT has reviewed this. So individually, each project is reviewed, but they also look at it collectively. So what you see in front of you, they've seen an earlier version of that. In terms of the scale of the entire program, it is a little bit larger than last training for the reasons that I've already outlined. What I will say is that it's not the policy and the development of policies and strategies and plans is done across the organisation. It's not just done in one area. So what you're looking at is a holistic whole of organisation view in terms of the program of work. And the other thing that I've asked for and they've talked a little bit about is the scope and scale of work. So we've given an indication in terms of what we think it'll take to deliver each particular piece of work. But that's the area that we are looking for feedback on. And, we've talked about this in the past, that sometimes as an organisation, we make projects bigger than what you as governors think they ought to be. And so that kind of feedback is necessary for us as well.
So where does I'm just wondering where the Deloitte report comes into and some of its findings and whether that's relevant in this, in the pieces of work that we need to do. Because I'm really thinking about, we're asking the organisation to find cost savings, and what are some of the things that we may not need to do or we could do differently, or merge some of this work together to help deliver some of the savings that we're looking for.
Yes, so in terms of the Deloitte report, some of that is reflected, I think, in the list here. Certainly, I think the procurement policy was called out by Deloitte and through a few other processes as well. It's also, I think, important to note that some of the work outlined in this document is also geared towards generating savings as well. So some of the new things that we want to do in terms of the long-term plan are geared towards making efficiencies through that process and obviously achieving a rates target that we are required to meet, potentially if that new legislation comes through. Ultimately, the work program is yours, it's not ours. collectively you decide what that work program looks like in terms of what's on it. We've told you what the legislatively required work is to do, and the rest of the buckets have some level of discretion around them in terms of when they're done, how they're done, the scale to which they're done, and that rests with the council in terms of the decision making.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bez. I'm now into the second round of questions, so unless anybody else who hasn't so far asked a question has got one. All right, Laurie.
Yeah, just looking at, thanks, I think you may have just explained the dog policy again, like why we're going through that, but there was another one in there, the bid policy, like I thought we did that last term. Yeah.
We made some amendments to it last time, just some 3 or 4 amendments to make it a little bit more workable. Again, it is, and it was mentioned, it was discussed at the time that was done at the time ahead of a fuller review around the bid policy itself. Again, we are 10 or 12 years down the track in that strategy, and the question, it's a reasonable time to possibly there's certainly demand from the bid associations to have a fuller discussion, but it'd be an opportunity to do that and to say, this is what our intent was, this is where we're at now, what does the next 10 years look like?
And I think the Arts and Culture 2 arts policies in progress, and that was from last term. Can you remind me what our request was to end up with those two here? And so I guess my question is, do they need to be reviewed?
That was an action out of Ahatini.
Okay.
So that was, so we've agreed Ahatini, so that was part of the work that flowed out of that to ensure that the public art policy was consistent with Ahatini. Again, that and the arts collection policy was picked up in that process as well. And then you go, are they very dated policies? How do they fit with where we are now, and where and within our current environment? So that's pretty much where they are. They're not burning issues, but they would be useful to be done.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jeff. Good explanation.
Nuruddin.
And here it says the triennium plan is non-legislative. Yes, it's not an act like annual plan or long-term plan. However, my understanding is that this is the direction of the council that passed by the governing body. Any annual plan, any long-term plan would be seen through the lens of that triennium plan. If anything that doesn't fit into that triennium plan, that automatically qualifies for the thing to be reprioritized.
Is that the question?
Well, just
I think you're correct. Obviously, triennium plan is not legislatively required. We do have a history of it here, so we've had one before, and they do. It's a guiding document, so it sets the direction for the organisation, it sets the direction for the city, it guides annual and long-term planning, and it embeds, the ideas and the concepts and the intent of the triennium plan in those statutory documents down the line, for sure.
So if that is the case, from the 4 things that you mentioned, with the exception of the regulatory requirements, the rest of them can be dependent of what you deliver on the triennium plan.
In terms of what you're talking about is, do we need to do bucket 4, in essence, which is what I showed on the screen before, and to some degree we do, because we have a committee resolution to conduct some of the work. All right, so bucket 4 is made up of 2 things: what committee has agreed that officers need to go away and do. Sometimes that's a report back, sometimes that's new work. That's part A. Part B is more discretionary. That part B is where officers are basically saying, as a business unit, whether it's a regulatory function or whether it's some sort of frontline service, they are often guided by some form of policy for their area. Sometimes it's out of date, sometimes it's 10 years out of date, and they're telling Jeff and I, look, the policy we've got, it's fine, but the world's moved on, the legislation's moved on, it really needs to be updated for us to work efficiently. And so those people have come to Jeff and Christine over the last few months and said, can this be added to the list for councillor consideration? So that's what bucket 4 is. Yes, there is discretion. You can revisit some of those committee decisions. Absolutely.
Thanks, Sharon. Tony.
Yes, I just want to pick up on Councillor McNulty's question around the Glenside Reserve status. And so, I mean, the reason it's important is we've had officer advice that the status of these reserves can only be changed as part of a full review of the dog policy, and that's not scheduled to 2032-34, which sort of implies we can't change the status of reserves with respect to dogs for the next 8 years. Is that correct?
I haven't. That probably came from my team. I have to watch what I say. We can do something in the meantime, on a specific, but we still have to go through a consultation process, and that does open the door for other, whenever we go out for consultation, it may open the door for other things to come onto the table as well. So it doesn't necessarily, in the ideal world, some of those things could be done, like if it was a bit closer than the 8 years away. We might say, look, we can do it in 2 years' time, but if it's that long, we can certainly respond more quickly.
Okay, so that's good news. That's great. And maybe we take this offline, but we just need some advice as to what we need to do to do that, given that in passing the dog policy, officers were already instructed to go and have a look at this. So whether we need to do anything more, I just want to get some understanding on that.
Yeah, we'll come back with some advice. Thank you.
Thanks. Geordie.
Yeah, I was just wondering, there are a couple of instances where there's policy work on the program with either an update or renew, but the wording in the training plan that it references in many cases just says to continue to do the work that those policies cover. So I'm just wondering how a review or an update to that plan kind of comes from. I guess when I thought I was approving the training plan, the intention was just to continue the work that is provided by the existence of the policies as opposed to a renewal or update of them.
I think in some instances work is required, in other instances there is no further work required. And what the team have done, they've identified all the policies that align or can contribute towards the delivery of training plan actions and objectives.
Fantastic.
Ben.
Yeah, just realised it's in the document, but in the training plan, clause 30 talks about a bunch of development areas for the urban development office, and it mentions Johnsonville. We have a Johnsonville town centre plan, which hasn't been touched since I think 2012, but I would expect that would probably be one of those corresponding links to the training plan. So it would be good just to get some advice around whether that needs to sit as a policy review, given it's a training plan commitment.
Thanks. We'll take that up and have a look at it.
All right. Unless there are any other questions, that will conclude the briefing. Thank you, everybody.